Becoming a Barbarian by Jack Donovan. The Fate of Man. Masculinity is tragic. Masculinity is a lifelong struggle, a gauntlet run against nature and other men to demonstrate virality and prove one's worthiness as a man in the eye of the other man. Masculinity is a challenge to honor the end only in that. A challenge to win coupled with a guarantee that eventually even the best man will lose. Masculinity means being born a boy who can only become a man by becoming stronger, by overcoming fearfulness, by becoming more competent and confident in his ability, and by earning the respect and admiration of other males. Every boy is born cursed. Every boy will be tried and measured against others, and he will soon perceive or understand instinctively. He soon knows that the way of man is the way of competition and strife. The way to manhood is through the gauntlet, and there is no end to it. Manhood is not a destination but a title to defend. The idea that a man should be secure in his masculinity is a bourgeois fantasy invented by therapists and repeated by women. Every king, every chief, every world record holder, and every silverback gorilla looks over his shoulder. Being good at being a man just means the challenge gets dialed up and the challenger becomes more formidable. This gauntlet must be run, whether a boy likes it or not, whether he accepts it or rejects it. To reject the struggle is forfeit. Avoiding the struggle is an acceptance to defeat and a demonstration of spiritual cowardice. There are some who will applaud this kind of forfeit as if it was courageous, but there are despisers of masculinity and strength. Despisers of masculinity and strength. There are foolish women and failed men or deceitful manipulators who perceive men to be passive for the reason of their own. However, accepting the fate of man and running the gauntlet of manliness means understanding that the fight is never truly fair, that all men are not born with the same strength. Accepting the fate of man also means understanding the fight is rigid, and that every man will either die early or live to see himself decline. Every man who does not die in his prime will live to see his body fail and become weaker, making him more reticent. Most men will live to see their father competence falter. Then their own competence falter, and they will live to see themselves lose their esteem of man. The best an old man can hope for is to have his achievement remembered and to be respected for his wisdom and consulted for his experience. Understanding masculinity means understanding that men can only reach their greatest potential through vital conflicts and competition with other men. The way of man is the way of pack hunt, and the man is the most dangerous game. Human masculinity is the evolution produce of gang selection, of brand of men who hunted and fought their way through far more perilous and demanded ages. Human masculinity, the testing and proving of strength, courage, mastery, and the desire to earn the respect of a given group of men require conflict to thrive, but also to strive. Eternal peace is the death of manliness. The peace is a death ruin. Strength can only be tested against resistance, and courage can only be tested through risk. Competence matters most when it is most desperately needed. Honor requires an honor group, a final group of men to stand in judgment of each other's virtues. No man can prove himself to every man everywhere, and the acceptation that every man should have to prove themselves to every man and woman creates a sense of futility. If the number of judges and challenges is infinite, why bother? If every man is a both brother and a potential threat, whom do you fight for? Who do you become the strongest and most courageous and most competent version of yourself for? How much can any one honor matter when he must answer to and be compared to billions of other men, of other strangers who do not and could not care what he does or how he lives or whether he lives or dies? A man in his honor get lost among the numberless horde, because a man cannot be accountable to everyone. Without an honor group, without a tribe, he is accountable only to his own ego. A man without a many band can falter himself freely, and he will be more likely than other would be to accept his own excuse. Most religions defer to the final assessment of a man's deed to the gods, but the judgment of the gods is far from convenient post-mortem. Brother judges you to your face in here and now. This phenomenon of masculinity is a human universal. Men all around the world and throughout history have shared the fate of man. In every dominant culture known, men have pushed each other to be stronger, more courageous, and more competent. They have tested each other and shamed or expelled men who refused to be tested, who made them look weaker as a group. Manhood has always been demanding. It has always been trial that ends only in death, and it has always been tragic. To compound the tragedy of manhood, masculinity is a human universal, something that all men have in common, but universalism destroys masculinity. Without separation, there can be no conflict, and without conflict, there can be no vital masculinity. To say that you love every man as your brother is not only a lie, but a resignation of importance and a forfeiture of manhood. It has been said that many enemies bring much honor, and it's also true that without enemies there can be no honor. Without outsiders there can be no insiders. Without them there can be no us. Without us there can be no honor, and therefore no honor. The experience of being a man is something all men have in common, an experience shared and understood by friends and enemies alike, but the very nature of masculinity demands that we go to our conflicts and fight it out. This drive to conflict is the fate of man. It is tragic, but all life is tragic. We live but are destined to die. All of our life stories are a collection of high and lows, of victories and defeat, of struggles and overcoming. Without conflict, no life story is worth telling. Without conflict and struggle, the answer to the question without happening is nothing. Like Odin and Thor, we know we will die, but unless we fight, we are already as good as dead. Better to live vigorously, better to fight than to simply wait for the end in peace.